my name is Tonie Wasco, and I'm going to talk about my action plan for improving vocabulary skills. So, the problem of practice is that language arts teachers at my school at Prairie View Middle School are not consistently taking the time to focus on vocabulary presented in the text, and we don't give the students enough opportunities to comprehend the vocabulary words in the curriculum, which is why this has helped me to look at the data from the past 2 years from NWEA, which is the district's assessment scoring. And based off the free instructional areas for language arts, which is literacy text, informational, and vocabulary, I was able to see that the learner center problem that I'm going to be addressing is being able to focus specifically on sixth grade, which is the data I have, and their vocabulary skills, since the students have been having trouble with determining the meaning of vocabulary words encountered while listening, reading, and viewing text in class. So there are some noticeable differences and similarities in the data. So based off figure 1 at the top, with test scores from 21 to 22 and figure 2, from test scores from 22 and 23. The biggest similarity is that there is an increase in students rising from the average, and high categories by the time they test in the spring for literacy and informational text. While that should be usually the norm of how we see test scores start to go up when students start learning more about, different reading comprehension strategies, building up their writing, looking at that, it's concerning looking at both of these figures when fall, spring, and winter vocabulary, because we are starting to see the opposite, where vocabulary with low average and low numbers is starting to increase versus the other two, literacy and informational, where that's decreasing. The big difference too, based off these two, is you can see the number of students between the 2 years. So within the past year, last year we had 3 classes with about a bigger number of students. So while honors was usually the lower amount, about 19 to 20 students, we had about 26 to 27, give or take, within those years. While you could see the numbers are starting to grow, we did have some additional students join, and we did have things where students were sick, and so they weren't able to make up those test days. But by the spring, for all 3 of those, from 21 and 22, we have 100 students. Versus this year, where we had a change in schedule, so we were able to have 3 classes, but we also have 3 language arts teachers. So now we have about a lot less, half of that for each class. So then my highest was about 52 kids by the spring, but we still saw the same pattern going on. And between these two, we are able to actually now have a 20 extra minutes versus last year where we had 60. So we now have 80 minutes. So we are able to use a very solid instructional strategy to help the students. Now, with current research, there is a concerning number of adolescent students who struggle with vocab. Based off the quote, we have 82% of students fell below the 40th percentile, with one of those variables being the measures of vocabulary and listening comprehension. So, there's a 74% demonstrated low scores in both areas. So, showing that these students are really struggling with being able to understand the word in a sentence or when it's being read to them, or if they are reading it, because they don't know what it means in the sentence itself in that text. There's also research connecting vocab knowledge and reading comprehension, which means that if students can't understand 90% of the words on the page, then they will struggle to understand what it is in the text. Based on what the quote was saying, if there's a lot of unfamiliar words, they're going to struggle. If there's only about 90%, they should be able to decode it, kind of use the words in the sentence to understand what's going on. And so if they're having difficulty comprehending what they're reading in the vocab, they're going to miss out on learning new words. And then even if students are able to phonetically say it correctly or spell it out, it's still hard for them to understand the vocab words if they don't know what it's meaning or it's helping them when they're reading the text. So if they are missing that, it's that missing link between the reading and language instruction in our school system. And because it's not there, we're seeing a lot of these low test scores. So what are some possible strategies? One is semantic mapping, which can be useful for students to connect their vocab words with other related words to fully understand its relation to other words. Again, it's a procedure where a student or teachers write in the middle of the concept words. So, for example, on my page, I have the word government, and then students are asked to list as many related words as possible, putting them in broad categories. So for government, we can have, it starts to, they have judicial, legislative, exclusive, and then they build on from there. So they can see a lot of words that are similar, and then, words that they have known prior to be able to connect it. Then the next one is the Friar model, which is another strategy used during instructional time and enhance students' vocabulary knowledge. So they would have the word in the middle, like for example, sonnet, the definition that they could look on the dictionary, characteristics of that. So in this case with sonnet, Shakespeare used it, so you would write that down. Examples, so taking examples of a sonnet and non-examples, in this case, something like The Raven, which is a short poem, and it's not a sonnet. So that is something that students would be able to use with any vocab word, and it's something that will really help to internalize the word and concept so it becomes a bigger part of their vocabulary. Another one is using games. That's another great strategy to get students engaged and interested, so such as using escape rooms, or Kahoot. Those two are really good because they're helpful for kids to be competitive, cooperating with peers, and helping in recalling vocabulary taught in class. So these are things that would be very fun and engaging for the students. Interactive word walls are another strategy that can be useful for students since they're able to participate in creating an image or sentence that goes with the vocabulary. So this could be with something like an image, to connect it, or with a word or sentences to help remember and review these words. Then we have the keyword method that would be similar to interactive word wall, but students are instead, it's slightly different where the students are going to be basically taking like an associative component, something that's similar. So for example, with Bella Bartok, they're a famous paintess. You could say Bella sounds like bell, bar talk sounds like bar, and talk. So and then we have images with it. So it involves something with a memory, something connecting with it, a keyword that sounds similar to the unknown word, and then linking it with a visual image or a sentence. Then finally, we have adapting study sync vocab questions, which could be useful because it's focusing on the specific vocabulary from the text. So using something like a concept definition video focuses on the concept vocabulary in the text, and then students will be able to do things like matching the words of its definition, making sample sentences, and answering a few multiple choice questions. So based off this, with the chosen instructional strategy, a lot of these could have a lot of medium and high impact. So lower one would probably be the study sync vocab because it's not as engaging and interactive for the students. Even looking at it, they would only have like 2 multiple choice questions, and it would just be mainly matching. And if teachers wanted to use it for novels, they would have to then kind of make their own that would be adapted. So study sync doesn't have that for novels. Whereas medium-wise, using digital physical games, using that keyword method, even using interactive word walls, that could be something where students can enjoy participating in, and then you might have some that not as much, but it's still something that students can work on, and it's very feasible because the teacher can either have it be digitally, and a lot of these you would be showing in the class. And then finally, Freyer model, which is the one I will be focusing on. It's something that the students will really be able to comprehend. There's a lot of research behind it, and there's been a lot of ways that this can help improve, and it's something that can be routinely used within the classroom for students to use. And again, it could be digital or physically made as well. So for implementing indicators, teachers will model the Freyer model for students and check them to see how their progress is. Students will be able to use the graphic organizers to work on the steps. So again, there's only those 4 steps, so it's going to be very easy. Students can work on either on it either independently with a partner or a small group. So then they're able to show and be creative with what they've created. So, like for their examples, and then be able to share that. So if they were struggling, they can look with a peer or partner and help create it. And then it could be displayed for students to see and review to remember that they learned in class. And then teachers can look at the graphic organizers and use assessments to see students' progress. Now, for the action plan, the first task would be to create materials for the professional development. So, including the fire model, its graphic organizer steps, and ways to display it for the students to see. So that would be the language arts department chair, instructional coach, and administrators for a August department meeting. Then, within that first week of August, the instructional coach will meet with the sixth grade language arts teachers, model for the teachers, and kind of with the students to be able to kind of have a professional development session on the model. And then from August to September, the sixth grade language arts teachers will then be using that model for comprehending vocabulary in the text. So they'll kind of show and model for the students and then have them work on it. And then from December to January, the sixth grade language arts from October to November, the instructional coach will go and observe and provide feedback for the teachers just to see how they're doing with the progress. And from December to January, the sixth grade teachers will then go into their peers' classroom to observe and provide feedback as well. Then January will be a department meeting where the sixth grade language arts teachers, the instructional coach, and admin will participate in a half-day professional development, discussing challenges, strengths of the fire model, reviewing students' scores and vocabulary with the assessments, and then looking at any modifications needed. And then from January to May, the sixth grade teachers will continue to use the fire model to demonstrate students' understanding of vocab words based on feedback. And then for evaluation, assessment-wise, summative, Socrative is a website and an app that is very useful because students will, at the same time, live work on the, say the quizzes or the tests and the vocab words every 2 weeks. That will then be collected, and then we can look at that data from there because it could export it into data that the teachers can then look at over those 2 weeks to see any improvements. NWE map testing and IR would also be useful as summative to collect that data, either every couple, fall, winter, spring, and IR would be for the spring. And informative, we have entrance slips, exit tickets, daily check-ins, and conferences, which can be useful just to daily check in with the kids and see how they're doing with the vocab. Department meetings wise, at the end of the year, we would review progress of students' vocab over the past year, compare it to the previous year's data, and then just determine if that fire model will be effective or if there's another strategy or method that could be helpful to improve those test scores.